I'm pleased now to introduce our first speaker and co-author of the report, Bhavina Barkada, Senior Campaigns and Policy Manager at Make UK.
Thanks, Carolee. Afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's Reviving and Rebalancing Regional Economies webinar sponsored by RSM. As my colleague Carolee said, my name is Bhavina. I'm the Senior Campaigns Manager and co-author of this report. This is the last of our 3 webinars that we're hosting for this report, and today we're going to be focusing on the findings for the north of England. So what does levelling up mean to manufacturers here? And what do manufacturers need to be able to support the revival and rebalancing of our regional economies here? This is a hot topic, and I'm sure you all saw the various announcements during yesterday's spending review. But this project was a 3-month exercise speaking to manufacturers across the country to understand the issues that really matter to them and what they want to see from government to effectively support our sector and level up. The 3 things that they told us that they want to see is a focus on local projects over national ones, improvements to our local and road transport, and finally, improving digital connectivity across the UK. It's important as we begin to rebuild our economies that we think about the crucial role that UK manufacturing has to play in this rebalancing. So I'm delighted to have with us a panel of experts who are going to be discussing the findings of this report. My colleague Annette Hobson, Regional Manager at Make UK, who's going to chair today's panel. Robert Pickersgill, Managing Director of W. Hallam Castings, based in Doncaster. Steve Fogg, Chair of the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership and Innovation Lead at the Northern Powerhouse. And to make this all possible, our wonderful sponsor, RSM, we're joined by Neil Sevitt, Partner and Head of Manufacturing at Yorkshire and North East Region at RSM. But before we get into the panel, we're also really lucky to have with us today Shadow Secretary of State for Business and MP for Doncaster North, Ed Milliband. So thank you, Ed, for joining us today. I'm going to be asking him a few questions based on the finding of the report. But before I do, I want to hand over to Ed to make some opening remarks based on what happened yesterday, but also the findings of the report and the work that he's been doing to date.
Bhavina, thank you so much. And I want to thank Make UK and RSM for your excellent report and for inviting me to be with you today. And most of all, if I may, I want to thank all of the manufacturers and businesses that we have on the call, because I know what an incredibly tough time it has been for so many businesses during this crisis. That's what I spend most of my days discussing, how we as a constructive opposition can try and push government to help out businesses. But so many businesses have stepped up in this crisis, whether it's making PPE, making ventilators, doing all of the things that businesses have done. And I think it has so shown the best of British business. And so I really just want to sort of commend all of the businesses for the work they've done during this crisis. It is an incredibly important subject that you are discussing, and I'm really glad that Make UK is doing so. I think all of us, whatever party we're from, whatever sector we're from, share the view that we are far too unequal as a country, both between regions, but also within regions and sub-regions. Really important. It's both. And we need to tackle both of those things. We need to tackle the regional inequality that we all know about, but we also need to make sure that as we level up, we do so across regions and across sub-regions, not just in aggregate overall terms. And I see that very much as an MP in Doncaster, MP for Doncaster North. There's 4 things that I just wanted to briefly mention that I think are important, and a lot of them come out of your report. First of all, power and resources, and whether power and resources is local and whether manufacturers have a seat at the table. You know, it's not just about how much we spend, it's how we spend it. The Chancellor announced some money yesterday of a big, I think it's a national pot of £4 billion. Any money that I can try and get for my area is welcome. But I've honestly got to say, and this is not meant to be a sort of party political point, because Labour governments did this in the past as well, I think we want to get it as local as possible, because as your report shows, across different regions, there are different priorities. And those priorities shouldn't be shaped by a civil servant in Whitehall or a politician in Whitehall. They've got to be shaped by local people. That's part of the problem, I think, is, have we really done that in the past? No, we haven't enough. And I think we're still, let's be honest, as a country, the whole notion of devolving power and resources properly is still a work in progress. Secondly, I really want to reinforce what you say in your report, that local projects matter as much as marquee regional and national projects. I think of my own constituency, and I mean, let me just take a very simple example, which is, can you get a bus from Stainforth or Moor Ends in my constituency into the centre of Lancaster, and how long does it take? I'm campaigning for a train station, a local train station in Aston. There was one there 50 years ago. Those things, they might, there's no way a national politician who doesn't represent my constituency is going to know the detail of those things, but they absolutely define whether this agenda is serious or not serious and whether it's going to make a difference. And so really, I think you're so right in this, that it's got to be, and I'm actually bidding for a train station in Aston through one of the government funds, but is it going to really make a difference to the fabric of people's lives, to people's ability to access jobs? So that's the second point. Thirdly, I want to emphasize the breadth, and I think this comes through in your report about all of the things that need to be done. Sometimes people think about this agenda as, let's just invest in some transport projects. But I think what your report rightly shows is it's much broader than that. It's about housing and the quality of housing, whether people are going to want to live in a local area. It's about skills and whether businesses can actually have the skilled workforce that they need. Dare I say it, it's also about our banking system. I think if you compare us with Germany and other countries, they do much better. And I know some banks do a good job, but they do much better at having a banking system that really supports our manufacturers. I've long been interested in the idea of regional banks, local banks, really supporting SMEs, so they really have the finance that is required. So that's the third thing, sort of the breadth of this agenda, if we're really going to make a difference. Fourthly, I just want to say just very quickly, scale. It's easy to talk about this agenda, but I think doing it in practice at scale is really important. We've been appealing to the government to bring forward money for a green recovery to help our manufacturers. And I think this is absolutely central for manufacturers. When I talk to people in aerospace or automotive or steel, I think we've got Liberty Steel on this call, this is a real, our manufacturers can be at the forefront of this green agenda. It shouldn't be an agenda that's going to harm them. It's an agenda that can help our manufacturers, but you've really got to invest at scale. So we will be pushing the government to, if you like, sort of have the courage of their convictions and do it at the scale that is needed for the kind of rebalancing that we need. Final 2 points, and sorry if I've gone a bit long. Final 2 points I just wanted to make were, I want to just be clear in this, that I'm not in any sense taking for granted the challenges of actually getting through the crisis for many businesses. And that is my day job. That is what I spend a lot of my time trying to do everything I can. And so many businesses, as I said at the start, are going through a difficult process. And dare I mention the B word, we do need a Brexit, as it says in your paper. A no-deal Brexit would be disastrous for our manufacturers. I think it's pretty common consent. Certainly that's what people tell me, including Make UK. We do need that Brexit deal. And we do need it to be done in a way that can enable manufacturers to have as little disruption as possible. I know that's really important. The thing I'll end on is this, which is, this is about, I think what's got us through the crisis has been a partnership between government, between public and private sectors. And that's what's going to get us the kind of industrial strategy we need to tackle this really, really important agenda.
Thank you, Ed. That was really interesting. It's great to see that so many of those things resonate with you as well. I actually wanted to start with one question which touches on your last issue, the industrial strategy. When we spoke to manufacturers, they were naturally quite cautious about what a refreshed industrial strategy would mean, because when we spoke to them during our consultation events, but also through the survey, when you can't see the change on your doorstep, when you can't see the change outside your business, what would a refreshed industrial strategy really achieve when you haven't seen or borne the fruits of the first one? So how can we use this as an opportunity to re-establish that critical role of our regions within that refreshed industrial strategy, but also what role manufacturing plays in not just, you know, boosting economic growth, but creating those good quality jobs in regions that we so desperately need.
Well, I can feel the people on this call metaphorically rolling their eyes, thinking government's very good at producing pieces of paper, long documents, and not so good at actually making them happen. And if we did that in our business, we wouldn't get very far. I mean, look, I think there is a problem. I mean, you know, my heart slightly sinks when I hear the government saying we're going to have a refreshed industrial strategy, because I think, well, let's implement the industrial strategy we've got. You know, let's actually make it happen. I sort of feel, you know, I've really felt in this crisis, particularly dealing with specific sectors. I just name aerospace because it's sort of, you know, it's really kind of gone through very tough times, as people know. You know, they're just desperate to get the last industrial strategy sort of to actually happen. And, you know, there's something called Project Birch, Pravina, which you may know about, which was supposed to kind of get money flowing to our manufacturers. And it's only done one loan of £30 million. And I think this speaks to some of the more institutional issues that we've got. So I suppose, you know, it's all fine for government to refresh its industrial strategy, and governments do that. I think what I want to see is the deeds, not just the words. And I think you are, you know, I just sort of emphasize this point, which is, you know, you say in your report, different regions are going to have different strengths. And I think it's really, really important that any strategy kind of is flexible enough to build on those strengths. I mean, I personally, you know, I think in our region, we could be really go ahead on some of the green agenda, because when I think about carbon capture and storage, or hydrogen, or offshore wind, we've got lots and lots of natural advantages that can really, really sort of help us, where we can really be at the forefront. So I think any strategy has got to be flexible, and it's got to have some long-term kind of planks in place. I come back to this point about, you know, what kind of banking system do we have? What kind of finance system do we have? But the main thing is actually implement it.
I just wanted to touch on the regional industrial strategies again, because it's one of the recommendations we put forward in our report as well. But quite often when you have the conversations with manufacturers, it's what model would work? How much is too much devolution and how much is not enough? And I think getting the balance is really right. And that's why I'm so glad we've got Steve with us today, who can talk a little bit about the Northern Powerhouse and their role. But we know that the manufacturing sector has been there for years and years and years. It produces great jobs. It's been a store of local communities. What would you say to manufacturers to make sure that they continue to be central to that regional and local plan? What should they be doing to get involved in that as their kind of call to action?
Well, look, I think LEPs can make a big difference. You know, in South Yorkshire, we've got the South Yorkshire Mayor, Sheffield City Region Mayor, Dan Jarvis. I know he takes the liaison with business incredibly seriously. Just to pick up on your point, though, about national, local, you know, and I suspect Steve and others will reflect this. I don't think we're in too much danger of like devolving too much at the moment. You know, we are so centralized as a country. When you look around Europe, you know, we are just the most central on all the measures that I've seen, and Steve and others may be more expert on the detail, but all of the measures I've seen say we are the most centralized country in Europe, and we are also the most unequal country in Europe. And the two things are related. And governments of both parties, this is not a party political point, have just had real trouble letting go. So I think, you know, there's something like the NHS, it's always going to be a national service, but there's lots of things which are not about the NHS, you know, from transport to skills to so many different areas. You know, there's issues around work and pensions. You know, I was actually just talking to Dan Fell from my Chamber of Commerce about this morning, and he said, look, on some things we've had good devolution. So, for example, BASE has been quite good at devolving. You know, we've struggled a bit more with the DFE, struggled a bit more with DWP. So I think, you know, it's just inevitable. If you're going to have different strategies for each region or sub-region, and you do need that, you've got to have the resources matching the strategy, and it can't all be done in Whitehall. I mean, that's my instinct. It's easier said than done, but I think that is my instinct.
I think it'll be music to people's ears that are tuning in right now. I have one last question before I'm going to hand over to Annette, who's going to share the findings for what it means for the North. But you've been really vocal about the sustainability and green agenda. And when we surveyed manufacturers, they said to us that both the green agenda and the digital agenda need to go sort of hand in hand. So whether it's the northeast of England or the southwest, it's a priority across the country for all manufacturers. So what do you think government should be doing more to support manufacturers to not only build back in a more sustainable way, but in a way that really takes advantage of that technological advancements that we've seen in the last 10 years?
Well, I think it's a really interesting point, isn't it? We've discovered that high quality broadband, we used to think of it as a sort of, well, maybe we thought of it a bit too much as a nice to have. And, this crisis has shown us isn't a nice to have, it's an essential. And it's essential for businesses, it's essential for households. This really, really matters. And I think it's going to matter, Lavina, a lot more, even when we're back to the new normal after the crisis than before, because so much is now going to be done. I mean, I think about my own life. I'm embarrassed to say I would never have thought of having a meeting with somebody on Zoom rather than in person before the crisis, or it'd be very rare. But I will think about it much more now for obvious reasons. And I think it is going to be central. And actually, as part of our overall green recovery document, which is called Build It in Britain, which I'd encourage people to look at, and we'll put the link maybe in the chat. We look at the whole area, and I think sometimes people do think about this green thing as being quite narrow. It's about making offshore wind turbines. It's about so much more than that, because it's about, of course it's about that, but it's about broadband. That is, as absolutely part of the agenda for the future. As I said about the automotive sector, steel, aerospace, it's about the carbon capture and storage, the hydrogen. In a sense, all of our economy is going to end up having to be green certainly by 2050 when we get to net zero. So I think this agenda is really sort of central. And I think it's really important, just the last point I'll make is, it's really important that this is an agenda, because I think it can often feel like it's something where there are some companies that are going to be more naturally able to take advantage of it. But what about the SMEs? What about the people who don't necessarily have the resource? And I think part of the job of government is to make sure that this agenda can reach, right across business, not just those businesses who, if you like, are more geared up to take advantage of it.
I couldn't agree more, and I could see nodding heads around the Zoom call. So no, your comments and your answers have been really interesting. So thank you, Ed. I think at this point, what I'm going to do is hand over to Annette, who's our regional membership manager at Make UK, who's going to share a little bit of the findings for the North specifically. She's got a few slides, and I think a lot of what you've said, Ed, will come up in the conversation that we have in the panel event. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Right.
Over to you, Annette.
Thank you very much. One moment. There we go. Thank you very much, Ravina, for outlining some of the overall findings of your report. And also thank you so much, Ed, for taking the time to join us this morning. It really is much appreciated. So before we move on and invite the panel to reflect on what's been discussed so far, let's just have a quick look at what our northern-based manufacturers and representatives have told us about what levelling up means to them. I keep this fairly short because I want to give the panel the opportunity to really get into the detail of this and share their thoughts with us. So the priorities mentioned from northern-based manufacturers to us about levelling up are very much about the improvements of local road and rail transport connections, and Ed has touched on this with the Lancaster example. And I think this isn't just local to the cities itself, but it can also be across the northern region. So take a journey from Hull to Liverpool, for example. It isn't always as straightforward as we need it to be, really. Also, the priority of local projects over national ones and improving digital connectivity. So we very much have touched on these already. The northern economy and the manufacturing sector that sits within it does, however, face many challenges on the path to seeing its economy levelled up. And manufacturers have told us that the leading challenge to the future prosperity of our region is the future trading relationship with the EU. It is, of course, a pressing concern for the entire UK economy, but it is particularly relevant to the north, as 56.4% of all regional exports are bound for EU shores. The UK average is only at 48%, not only, but it's 48%, so it's much higher here in the north for us. A no-deal Brexit and the disruption to the supply chain and border delays is a key concern for northern-based manufacturers. Looking at the priorities for manufacturers over the next 12 months, skills have been cited as a critical component in our region's levelling up. Especially, we need to take into consideration that our region has the lowest relative level of population at degree level and above. Upskilling is absolutely paramount for many manufacturers. Businesses have told us that they are prioritising investment in the skills of their workforce to ensure that they are equipped to respond to the changing conditions ahead. Investing in new plant and machinery and IT is also part of manufacturers' planning. But we also need to look at the opportunities, and I really hope that this discussion this afternoon is focusing on those as well as the challenges, because we do have many great opportunities ahead of us. A focus on clean energy is just one of them, not just for manufacturers to be more efficient and use less energy, but also to enter new markets and benefit from the green economy. Improving the bottom line and exciting projects such as the energy cluster on our shores are just a small part of our regional opportunities. It will also help our businesses to future-proof. COVID-19 has really proven how agile our sector is, and building on the regional differences and the strengths within each region, putting the manufacturing sector back at the heart of local communities will lead to the revival and rebalance of our local economies. It's worth noting as wages in our sector are 13% higher than national average, and every one manufacturing job supports the creation of 1.4 jobs elsewhere. So we really must place manufacturing at the centre of economic recovery. So I would like to now, let me just stop the screen share. Stop share, here we are. If I would like, Neil, would you like to next one? Just outline what your thoughts of the report's finding, and also briefly explain to the panel and the delegates watching what our
Thanks, Annette. Thanks, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that in terms of just our welcome slide there. I'm just going to put it onto slideshow. I've just got a couple of slides. So look, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome from RSM. We're delighted to be associated with this project and to work closely with Make UK. My name's Neil Sevitt. I'm the Regional Head of Manufacturing in Yorkshire North East, and I've been a partner at RSM for more years than I care to remember. Just a little bit about RSM, if I may, before I get into some thoughts from our client base and also from the region. So just a little bit about RSM. We're part of the 6th largest network of independent firms across the world. We are represented in about 120 countries, employing around 43,000 people across the world, 800 offices with a combined fee income of about $5.1 billion. So a significant player. And I'm going to come on to manufacturing as we start to talk about the region. More locally in the UK, about 4,000 people across 34 locations and about 350 million of sterling of fee income. And in the northern region, we have about 1,000 people across the region, across 9 offices, with a strong focus on manufacturing. And our principal offices in the north are Leeds, Newcastle, Hull, Manchester, Liverpool and Preston. It's really great to be associated with Make UK. A significant part of our client base in this region are manufacturers. So it's great to be associated with them. I thought I'd just share with you some of the things we come across that really are consistent with the survey that we've just seen. And one of the areas actually I don't think has been mentioned, but very, very strong, is the ability and the need to maintain cash. What we've seen certainly over the last 6 to 9 months with the pandemic situation is that cash is king. And we've been working very, very closely to help our clients maximize their cash positions, helping them with their working capital needs to ensure they've got that cash flow to meet the needs as they come due. There are various situations we've been able to introduce them to, particularly R&D tax credits. Most of you will be very familiar with those, but we're always amazed at the number of businesses that haven't maxed out on R&D, obviously capital allowance as well. But more specific to the COVID situation is we've been working with our clients to help them understand the furloughing arrangements, working with them and HMRC to get time to pay arrangements, making sure they're taking absolute advantage of the opportunities the government has provided to smooth the cash flow in this quite challenging time. Additionally, we've been working with our clients to help them on looking at how they fund their businesses through restructuring their debt, making sure that they work closely with their bankers and also take advantage of the opportunities that are out there, the funds that are out there from the various incentives and schemes available from government, CBILS, etc. Another area that's come out of the survey was clean energy. It's great to see that this is a priority for manufacturing businesses. I think the days of the manufacturers being a grubby place to work are long gone. Businesses are now very much in the mind of clean energy and making these places, making manufacturing places a great place to work.
Neil, I'm just going to jump in here because I think Ed needs to leave. So I just want to say a really big thank you for joining us for slightly longer than you anticipated. But it's great to have you, and hopefully we can continue this conversation later. So
yeah, I really apologise to colleagues for having to leave, but I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And people can obviously contact me at my parliamentary address, ed.milliband.mp@parliament.uk, if they've got further issues they want to follow up.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Ed.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem, Bavina. So,
sorry, go ahead, Neil.
That's okay. Just moving down my list, I'm conscious of the time. Again, Brexit, and Ed Milliband mentioned this in his presentation. Brexit is a key concern for businesses, and it's possibly got put on the back burner as people have been fighting with the coronavirus issues. But certainly, key areas for us in discussing matters with our clients has been what if there's a no-deal Brexit? What about trade borders? What if the supply chain is disrupted? And we've been working closely with our clients on planning for Brexit, both before and then what to do on the other side of that. And you know, it's a major concern for all manufacturing businesses and in fact the wider business market generally. We're hoping that as we come out the other side of the 31st of December, that businesses will be able to continue to trade. And then just finally, a couple of points there, digital connectivity, just businesses investing in better ERP systems. That seems to be the key investment program at the moment. You know, digital, we've all learned, haven't we, over the last 6 to 9 months that actually without digital working skills, we cannot trade. And manufacturers are no different. They're finding resources now to invest in new schemes, new systems and so on. And then finally, again, this was mentioned a little bit earlier, transport links. Hull to Liverpool is just not a great journey to make. And it's a journey that I'm sure we all make from time to time. We just wish it was better. You know, question is Leeds and Sheffield to London more important than Hull to Liverpool? I think we probably know the answer to that in the north. But it's great that that's on the agenda and is being discussed. And certainly if an investment is made into east-west, that will certainly help levelling up. I think there's often a case that those in the south, in government, don't always understand what our region is about and the dynamics of it. It would be great if there was levelling up and there was a significant investment in cross east-west links. So I think that's probably it. I've probably spoken for too long, but I'll hand back to Annette. I hope that's okay. If anybody's got any questions, you know, there's a Q&A session afterwards.
Thank you very much for that, Neil. Rob, I invite you to share your thoughts and also introduce yourself and the business to the panel and the attendees, please. Oh, are you okay to unmute yourself?
No, can you have a go at it at that end, please?
No, it's done. You've done it.
All right, okay. Thanks. Sorry about that, everybody. Well, W. Hallam, as I was saying earlier, pre-meet, we are situated in one of the fabled red wall areas in the Don Valley constituency. And we have changed colour. So we're really in a constituency that represents all that's been talked about in terms of these red wall issues, and that's of course highly relevant to the levelling up agenda. And you know, Hallam is an older company. It was established in the 1960s, and British industry was very different then. And looking back through the records, Hallam has had to reinvent itself to diversify and to adopt to changes in markets and conditions around it. And we're still going through that process. Now, our core business was originally pressure die casting in aluminium alloys, which are fully recyclable, I might say, so that's more appropriate than ever. And there is actually a background in electric motor development with some of the big UK manufacturers at that time in the 60s and 70s. And that, again, that expertise, believe it or not, is coming back to be useful again. You know, this year, like all other manufacturers, have gone through the terrible lockdown period. And I want to take this opportunity to thank our staff for the way they coped with that. And I'm sure that's true across the whole sector. But there's a lot of publicity about NHS issues. And I know a lot of people in the NHS, and they're extremely, they've been extremely brave, dedicated and hardworking, no denying it. But some of the other sectors have actually been forgotten about. In lockdown in March, you know, people had to learn how to cope with a completely different regime around them in terms of distancing. We had to almost work out what was required at that time. So let me say publicly how grateful we are to our staff for that. As far as the report's concerned, it's all highly relevant. We're big believers in devolving powers to the mayoral authorities and the LEPs. In Sheffield City region in particular has been really helpful for manufacturers through not just the last year or so, but for a while now. It's been hand-holding particularly smaller manufacturers. I mean, we're about 60 employees and we have 40 odd mainly UK customers. We work with them on a partnership basis, which is again what you need to do going forward, I believe. You know, SCR's been almost a model, dare I say. I'm sure there are good examples everywhere else, but from what we know about SCR, that's been really useful. And we see that as the way forward in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Now, last but very definitely not least, Steve, would you like to introduce yourself, your role as part of the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership, but also the innovation lead for the Northern Powerhouse? We are extremely pleased that you were able to join us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. Yeah, my name's Steve Fogg. I'm the chair of the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership. But probably worth noting also that I retired from BAE Systems in May, having had 40 years in the manufacturing industry, engineering, design, development. So this report's very, very relevant to my history, but also the future for the North. Yes, as part of the Northern Powerhouse, which is the 11 key chairs in the North coming together, we are looking for I would say, the golden threads through the North that we can collaborate on and work together on and make a huge difference for the North. I thought Ed's point was really well made, by the way, in terms of its local areas need to be able to take control and advise and put the right ideas down on paper. And we have to recognise as well that when we talk about transport, it's often not the big links. So I get the Hull to Liverpool, I get the London to Leeds. It's often the links in the counties. It's the links between manufacturing companies to get to those major links. They're really poor across the North, and we need to invest a lot in those as well locally. So, you know, for me, this report gets to some really clear, simple interventions that would make a real difference for the North, and I really welcome it. And I think it's fascinating that often in a time of crisis, central command and control occurs, and it's probably right. But when we move to the point of recovery, when we move to the point of manufacturing industries reinventing themselves and coming out of this, you have to put that into the arms of the local manufacturers. They have to define what's needed. They have to help us define the future. So, you know, I welcome the report. really pleased to be here. And I think this is a great opportunity for us as a nation, but also the North, and also for Lancashire to recover itself and do great things for the future.
Thank you very much for that. We've got some questions are starting to come in as well. It's a very interesting one about, it's an anonymous attendee here, but it's asking about gender inequality and women's economic empowerment, if they have been considered at all in this issue, either in the consultation with businesses, with organizations, or in the minds of the panel members today. So is there an issue or concern implicitly at all in this, if you think, or is this something that you feel applies to your organizations as well? I might start off with Rob on that one to see if you've got any sort of points to make regarding this.
None whatsoever. We don't even regard it as an issue. We've got girls in senior positions here. Our production manager is being developed to attain level 3 and beyond qualifications. I don't see it as a problem whatsoever, actually. It may be in other sectors, it is more of an issue. I don't think it is in manufacturing anywhere. I suppose all you might say is that engineers, I don't know how many female graduate engineers, for example, or engineering apprentices there are. I think that there might be something going on there, but that's a matter of personal choice, isn't it? I don't know. I'm not aware of any issues around discrimination against entry into those career streams.
It is really positive to hear then as well that a business such as yours is embracing that, and very positive to hear that it isn't deemed an issue at all. So Bhavina, is it anything that's come up during the consultation at all?
I think it's I think it focuses more around the perception of our sector. So there's been lots of talk about and this isn't just an issue of gender equality or just focusing on like men versus women or anything. I think it's just a general perception of our industry that actually there are things that we can all do to make it more appealing to people of all different backgrounds. And I think that work is happening across different manufacturers, whether it's big or small. There's much more that we can do. But I think in terms of the perception of the industry and how we can make sure that that next generation comes in, for manufacturers, it's just making sure we've got the skills we need going forward, making sure that they're in the right roles and those people can access the opportunities that are out there in manufacturing businesses across the UK.
I think, can I just say that I think there's something of an issue around graduation from UK universities. I think something like out of about 160,000 last year, probably a third actually went back to their countries to compete against UK manufacturers. That's the university sector now being drawn into the politics, but that's simply a matter of fact. That's what's happening, and universities don't see that as a problem.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Rob. Steve, can I ask you here, with almost half of the manufacturers reporting that they are dissatisfied with the government's levelling up agenda so far, why do you think they have failed to grasp the needs of the regions and manufacturers, and how can they better understand this, or how can we help to make the point better?
Yeah, I think, well, let's face it, this is a real challenge. And if you try and do it centrally, you really won't understand the nuances of the differences between the regions. And I think that becomes one of the challenges they face. I think the other challenge we face is this term devolution, which can often get confused, actually. It's a grand term, but what it actually means is working with the local people, the local manufacturers, and engaging locally on what the right things to do. So I suspect there's a real difference between the fact if you sat in a mayoral combined authority with a sense of centre to it, and if you're not sat in a mayoral combined authority, it can often be a different feeling and a different approach. So, the key, I think, really is that we have to listen to manufacturers and allow them to try and define their future. And, it is all about embracing difference for me. It isn't about trying to have an answer that's the one answer from Whitehall that fixes everything across the nation. There will be major differences regionally, sub-regionally, I think I'd said that as well, sub-regionally and very locally on sectors, skills, everything. And I just think they can't possibly grasp every element of it without delving into the regions to try and do that. And I know they are trying to do that. I know they set up some task forces and they are reaching into the regions to try and do that. And, you know, but it's got to be accelerated in my view.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We've got a question coming in here for you, Neil. The survey showed the manufacturers in the north are most concerned about Brexit and trade borders in the immediate future. How confident are you that your manufacturing clients are prepared, or are you still getting lots of questions being asked?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question, very topical. And as I said in my presentation, it had taken a little bit of a back burner because of the other issues that we have with the pandemic. But how well prepared are they? It's very mixed. There are a number of businesses, hopefully not too many of our clients, but there are a number of businesses that we know are not prepared and only really now coming to the realization that things might change on the 1st of January. We've been working closely with a significant number of our clients, and not just exclusively manufacturers, but across the broad range, to help them understand what might be happening and what to do from the 1st of January. So I think it's quite mixed. I don't think people are as prepared as they should be. There's been a distraction of the pandemic, which has probably sidetracked them. I think there's a lot to do between now and the 31st of December. And I think some businesses might find a few shocks when they wake up on the 1st of January. So I think there's a lot to do.
Thank you very much. That's for us, Neil. Rob, got another one. How can we use the refreshed industrial strategy as an opportunity to re-establish the critical role regional economies and our sectors play in delivering economic growth, powering productivity and creating good jobs?
Yeah, I think Ed sort of addressed this. You know, I think he said, instead of concentrating on refreshing the strategy, why don't we try and implement what it already came up with? And there's an interesting report, actually. The Industrial Strategy Council has been set up to kind of monitor the activities of or the fallout from the proposals in the original strategy. And I think it identified 140 or more streams of funding, implying work streams in turn to implement various initiatives. And only a handful of those have actually had any funding attached to them. And so you've got to agree with what Ed's saying. You know, here we've got a pretty comprehensive framework already, because it's not just the strategy document itself, it's what lies underneath it in terms of what's voted through the Green Book and the rest of it. And he has got a point there. And the refresh could come from looking at wider issues, I think. For example, what do we mean by infrastructure? I look at it in very broad terms, because things like social care, housing provision, well-being of employees are all highly relevant. And if you're looking at differences between the regions, if you look at the deprivation indexes, which again are all ONS, available through ONS and similar statistical bases, government databases, the deprivation differences in the regions are extremely marked, and they kick in to and affect things that employers have to deal with. If you've got employees with poor housing, poor health, addiction problems, they wash up into your HR department. And my colleagues in the health sector say, you know, it's the health sector where they really wash up, because you know, they've got people there that they've got to take in because they've got nowhere else to go, sort of thing. But this kind of, the view, I think, needs to be broadened, because the industrial initiatives need to be married with the social and welfare initiatives. It needs to be joined up. And time and again, the reports that you look at, they'll all point out this lack of joined upness across government departments. I mean, the strategy, I think I read, affects something like 20 different government departments or quangos, as they used to be called. And it's this overarching integration and joined upness that needs to be concentrated on in any revisiting of the strategy, I think.
I just wanted to jump in here and because I think what Rob's saying is so important, because affordable housing is something that came up, not just obviously in the north of England, but actually in the south of England as well, actually, that young people just couldn't afford to live there. So how can you keep talent there? How can you encourage them to then join businesses in those local areas? In terms of that local coordination, I guess it can be quite hard to kind of come together with a regional vision about what you want to achieve. So I was just really interested in getting Steve's point of view here as to how you do that, how you kind of get everyone working in the same direction towards a goal, which can benefit everyone and tie together not just those business aspects, but education, training, skills, social housing, because they are huge, huge issues.
Yeah, it's a massive challenge, isn't it? And you know, I think it has to be bottom up and top down. So we have to take an approach that we allow the local areas to build up, because they have the best knowledge, to build up the strategies and ideas that they need. And then we look for the points of collaboration where we can leverage and have most benefit from a regional point of view. So if I take a look at Lancashire, what we've tried to do is fundamentally change the approach. So we've set up 6 new sector groups, and you know, we purposely ensured that we've got business leaders running sector groups and business leaders sat around the table. And they're not just talking about, you know, how do I bring manufacturing back? They're talking about their area, they're talking about their improvements they need, they're talking about health and well-being, they're talking about skills. So they're taking, yes, a priority. How does our sector transform itself and take the opportunity out of the crisis of today? But of course, we all know the enablers are better housing, better skills, better health. So we have a strategic framework which starts to knit that together to create an overall strategy. And I think that's the only way you can do it. I mean, Rob's point is so well made. If I look at Blackpool, it's probably one of the lowest people on the deprivation, or the highest probably deprivation in the country. It's remarkable. It's sat next to, within a 5-10 minute drive of really affluent areas. So there is something in the nuances of those small towns that have become very deprived. But when I go to Blackpool, I also see massive opportunity there, you know, huge opportunity. We just allow people to pull through and define what they are, and we fund and resource them.
Thank you very much for that, Steve. This is a really, really good point you're raising there. If you're thinking now about timescales, when to achieve all this by, there's a question that's come in that touches on the timescale as well, about a business that's based in Northumberland and exports around the world. And around 4 years ago, they attended a meeting where discussions were being held around improving the A69 from a single carriage to a dual one. And they're still in the same position now, and this was 4 years ago. So if we're looking at achieving any of this, and timescale is it's really something that needs to be addressed here. So where do you think this would fit in that, and what would your suggestions be? If we start with Steve as a follow-up from what you've just said now, and then Rob, if you would like to come in there as well, that would be great.
Yeah, I think, and you know, colleagues will recognise this. Decisions in that space take a long time, and when you sat in a business, you know, we have to make decisions today. And I think the other bit around some of this is that local government tends to have smaller costing cycle periods. So it will think about the next 12 months or the next 18 months, and it will think in those annual chunks. Whereas in business, we're thinking, yes, an annual view, but we're looking at 5 and 10 years ahead as well. So we take a strategic approach to investments. And I think that's what slows things up. But actually, if you take the basis of your report And if we take the knitting together of the infrastructure needs with the industry sector needs, that were the opportunities to invest and develop, and we do that as an integrated parcel, then maybe those decisions can be quicker and maybe we can accelerate those. Because if we don't, then those enabling infrastructure projects that actually enable small companies to grow because it gives them the linkages to other parts of the country or internationally. Without doing them, we just slow the recovery down. So, you know, we've got to do something there and speed that up.
Thank you, Steve. Rob?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I was waiting for you. The problem is, even the initiatives announced, the 4 billion announced yesterday in the spending review, and the other initiatives that have sort of spun out of the original strategy document, they're all based on a bidding system through devolved authorities, but there are ideologies, aren't there, since 2010 around competition and around spending a lot of time getting these proposals together, and all that causes to occur is delay, both in getting the proposals together and then having a panel decide the merits of the proposals. And you know, I'm not sure about the bidding system. I think the regional authorities should be able to draw together independent academic scientific information which establishes the need clearly without having to go through this competitive process all the time for relatively small amounts. It's already there. I go back to the deprivation indices. You've got to do something about some of the indicators that you get out of that. It's not a question of whether it ranks for funding or not. It simply has to be done. And I don't understand why we haven't got more of that, where there are must-haves and must-dos to start with, which automatically get funding.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Looking at the time, we're approaching the end of the hour. It's always the case, isn't it, when the discussion gets going? So could we, to finish, could we go around the panelists and just find out what is the one ask you would have of government at this stage now, taking into consideration the spending review, the findings of the report, and looking at what needs to be done? If we start off with you, please, Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Annette. Listening to all of the comments, I think the transport links and the ability to move goods around the region, we just continually struggle with this. And I think, you know, to have a successful business, you need to be able to get your supplies in and your goods out and your people in and your people out efficiently and effectively. If you can't do that, you're really going to struggle to have a successful business. I would challenge government to come and spend time in our region, working in our factories, our manufacturing businesses, not just for a day, but maybe for a week or a month, and see how they feel getting, you know, give them the roles to play, get moving stock in and moving stock out, see how they feel. Maybe that'll change their minds about how important this is.
Thank you, Neil. Steve?
Yeah, I think my plea is pace. So, you know, I think what happens is, and it's a history of process. What happens is the big report gets commissioned. It then gets looked at and the recommendations then get recommissioned and re-evidenced and rethought through. And that all takes time. And while that's happening, massive impact is occurring. So for me, be brave, have pace, and sometimes go with what the evidence is already telling you. Don't overanalyze it, and get the decisions made and get some interventions made. Because, you know, I'm a great believer in making some decisions that are a step along the way because you know they're the right things to do. Make them early and get the investments in early and make the change early. Make the huge difference because it creates opportunity, it creates optimism, it creates hope for the regions that things can change. So pace for me.
Those excellent words there, definitely. And Rob, over to you.
Well, I want to just throw something in from left field here at this stage. You know, Annette, that I think productivity is really important in this argument, because and that's a micro level set of initiatives. But interestingly, if you look at Australia and New Zealand, they actually have productivity commissions, and so some funding is channeled through them directly to manufacturers who've got good plans. Having said we shouldn't have bids and plans, in this case, I think the manufacturers are okay to get them together to show how they will improve their productivity and draw down funding associated with it. I think I saw somewhere that if productivity levels were the same across the nation, we'd generate an extra 200 billion in GDP, which is enough to pay for the NHS and the education service. So there's got to be a strong argument for looking at that. Can I just pay compliment to MAKE's 2018 reports on this, unpacking the puzzle and piecing together the puzzle, which addresses a lot of the issues around productivity. It means that manufacturers have got to take the initiative themselves. They've got to be told that they've got to do things better. But that's okay, isn't it? If we're getting good infrastructure report, we're then going to the manufacturers and saying, look, you must do more than you are doing. Implement these indicators, KPIs, and try and get up to a level with the KPIs. And there will be support for the proposals that you come up with for getting there. I really think that's an important issue at the other end of the scale, if you like, infrastructure around, but within organisations, they've got to take some initiative as well to get themselves more efficient, not least to be able to compete in the new world. There's a NatWest report on this, by the way, as well, which is interesting, called Future Fit, which talks about visions in association with improving efficiencies, and it is relevant. Can't pretend that it isn't.
Thank you so much, Rob. Right, I think that's it. Yes, we are almost there at the top of the hour. I would like to thank the panelists, Rob and Steve, for joining us today as well and sharing your thoughts. A special thank you to Neil and to everyone at RSM for partnering with Make UK to ensure this vital report in support of UK manufacturing has been created. And a final thank you to everyone who has contributed to the report and to everyone who has joined this lunchtime discussion. But it doesn't stop here. It is only just the beginning. So I suppose it's a slight call for action here for everybody who's joining us today. Download your regional breakdown and showing the key findings of the investigation, and share this with your local MP, with the combined authorities, your LEPs, the mayors where we have got them in place, and those regional key stakeholders, to really make sure that we continue to influence and shape this agenda. And for those of you who would like to learn more and dig deeper into the findings, the contact detail for Bavina and James will be shared as well after, alongside the reports. So please feel free to get in touch with Bavina or with James, or indeed as well your regional team, myself, there's June Smith and Dawn. And again, those contact details will be shared with you too. And I think, Bavina, you look like you're wanting to come in.
I was just going to say a big thank you to everyone who made all of these webinars possible. They'll all be recorded. We'll answer the questions that we haven't got to in the Q&A, but just a really big thank you from James and I, who co-authored the report. It's been a really fascinating week, and hopefully this is just the beginning.
Brilliant, right? We're 1 minute over, so thank you again, and I hope you'll join us soon. Take care.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.